It says recording. That seems like a good sign. All right. Well, why don't we begin in the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Heavenly Father, we give you thanks as we prepare to enter into the season of Lent for this opportunity to gather together as your brothers and sisters in your name. Bless us that we may pass this evening in peace and tranquility in the knowledge of your care for us and the hope for your plans for our community. We ask this through Christ our Lord. Amen. Father, and Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. Well, thank you all for coming to what is now our seventh, I think it's the seventh Parish Family Town Hall gathering. There's got to be an easier way to say that, but that's the name I chose, so here we are. I don't think you guys need much of a recap on how these things go, I suspect. Have most of you been to at least one of these at this point? So I'm going to spend only about 10 minutes, because Jason and I were talking a little earlier, and it occurred to me, and it should have occurred to me sooner, in previous town halls, that maybe he'd like to also offer an update on the larger sort of archdiocesan viewpoint of Partners in the Gospel. But so maybe 15 minutes total of that, and then Q&A until we've reached an hour or so, or an hour and a half or so, or you've run out of questions, whichever comes first. So before the larger news piece, I do want to acknowledge what some of you, I suspect, may have heard. I know that there is no gossip line like the parish gossip line. Father Ed did indeed admit himself into the hospital, not last night, but really yesterday afternoon. He was experiencing some chest pain, and so rightly identified something wasn't right. He asked for a bit of privacy on details, so I'm going to be sparse on those. He did eventually get an ambulance out of town to a bigger hospital. I'll keep that to myself as well, which one. But he's doing well. He's in good spirits. He's going to be staying there at least another night, as long as is necessary to really evaluate and figure out what's going on. He's stable. He's fine. He's in good spirits. I talked to him last night. I'm hoping to call him after this and see how he's doing. So things are going well on that front. For the immediate future, we have a contingency plan. Thankfully, we have had some conversations about what might happen if one of us is unavailable for ministry. And so we have a contingency plan this weekend. An email went out to the parishes affected for mass cancellations. Port Angeles and Sequim will have no changes in their mass schedule. But Father Golly and I are going to be doing a bit of running around, so you may see a different priest than you're expecting. Port Townsend is going to have their 11 o'clock mass canceled, so Father Golly can come over here to Sequim. And I'm going to jump after the 8:30 mass here. I'm going to drive out to Forks. They're only going to have one mass in that area. So we've got a few things going on there. The following weekend, we already had some substitute priests lined up, because I still planning on going to the Emerald City Comic-Con. And Bishop Schuster had called and said, "Jacob, I want to visit one of your parishes, St. Joseph." I said, "Well, Bishop, I'm going to be out of town." And he said, "Even better." And so Bishop Schuster's going to be at St. Joseph's, the 11 o'clock Mass in a week. And Father Rob Evenson, praise God, was available. So we will have our regular schedule the following weekend, not tomorrow and Sunday, but the following weekend. And then we'll evaluate from there. So unfortunately, this is one of the realities of your priests being human. So we apologize deeply for our humanity, but there it is. Pulling back from that immediate development, I feel like apart from the crazy of the last 48 hours or so, we have entered into a kind of a new period of stability in our parish family. So you all are aware that we had our last kind of big push for mass schedule changes at the end of December, starting in January, with the new weekend mass schedule and a slight changing of our daily mass schedule and confessions. I won't pretend that it is pleasing to everyone, especially with the vigil masses and the confessions shifting around. But they are, I dare say, the best that we could hope for given our circumstances. And now my hope is that we begin moving forward in kind of settling in without any major changes looking ahead, and also rebuilding or building up our foundations. And what I mean by that is our leadership groups, our councils, particularly our pastoral council and finance council. I know that all of you, I'm confident that all of you are very familiar with canon law and that you read it and brush up on it on a regular basis. And if you don't, why not? But canon law specifically requires that every pastor have a finance council at each of his parish, and then our archbishop requires that we also have a pastoral council at every parish. And at least one of our parishes didn't have and doesn't yet have a finance or pastoral council. At least one of our parishes is really struggling with its numbers and its participation. And one of our pastoral councils here in Queen of Angels lost a member recently, Bill Trudall, when he died unexpectedly late last year. So we've got some work to do on that front of building up our councils. My hope also is, now that we are again stable in sort of the imminent things, to start looking at and dreaming about what we might want to do in faith formation, how we might want to build out the programs we have or start new things. In some ways, my hope is that we just take all the spaghetti we have and we throw it at the wall and see what sticks. What do you want to do? What do you want to try? I've had folks who've come to me with the different ideas, and my general rule of thumb, if you want to start a group, if you want to start a program, if you want to start a long-term or short-term effort, my requirements are that you have 3 people who are responsible, co-responsible for whatever that is. I don't care how you structure yourselves, so one of you can be president, vice president, or secretary, or I don't know, name yourself prince, king, and queen, however you want to name yourselves, but 3 people who take responsibility, and then a plan, and as long as that plan aligns with the mission of the church. So if you're looking to do, I don't know, puppy sales at the church, that probably won't get approved. But if you wanted to do a Bible study for a season or for a long-term thing, as long as there's three of you who are willing to run it and fit it into our schedule and be our contact people, we'll give it a shot, see how it goes. And so my hope is that over the next many months, not just the next 6 months, the remainder of our sort of fiscal year, but the next many months, we might begin to kind of ease into these changes we finally settled on, and also look at, okay, what do we want to do? Or what might we want to try out? Or what new things have we not tried out? Or how might we explore what it really means to be a larger Catholic community beyond the boundaries of our individual parishes? So those are things that I'm looking at right now. I did write a blog post about this at fathermaurer.com, and I would love for you to read that if you haven't already. It's a little more in detail. You can even hear about my desire for a Catholic Comic-Con, but I'm going to dangle that carrot and let you go look it up if you haven't already. Other things that are happening in the parish family, we are almost, not quite, but almost completed with the roof repairs at St. Mary's in Port Townsend. You might recall that when I got here, they had a depression that was as long and as wide as a canoe, basically, on one side of the roof. It was sagging inward, not collapsing internally, but outwardly. The roofing had sagged inwards and was in the process of collapsing in place. So we went ahead and removed the roofing. The original project was going to be $400,000, give or take. When we approved that, got the loan, took the roof off, we discovered there were rotted beams, which is very exciting, as you all know, in Washington State. We discovered that in October, the rainy season, so it's no problem at all. And got a company in. It took them a little while to get out here to get the evaluation for us to figure out financing. We got all that proved. We unfortunately had to get another $200,000 for a total of $600,000 project, but the work is nearly completed. The beams have been replaced. There were 4 rotted beams. They've been replaced. The roof is being put on practically as we speak, and we're hoping and praying for a completion by mid-March. So that is good news. The next step, of course, will be fundraising. Look forward to talking to you about that as well at all the parishes. I'm sure you're all quite excited. Across the other parishes, St. Anne's has been looking forward to a sanctuary renovation that Father Ed has been spearheading, and so they're in the stage now of choosing a new crucifix and kind of considering they're going to tear the carpet out and looking at putting in new flooring of some sort, raising up the platform. I don't know how many of you have been out to St. Anne's, but the way that the altar is configured, it's got its own platform, and then it goes down, and you got the chairs and the ambo on each side on a different platform or different level. And then the tabernacle is up on a platform, but down and then up. All that to say, it's quite the obstacle course if you're not having the grace of a ballerina. And guess what? Your priests don't. To say nothing of carpeting being in a sanctuary, if there are hosts that drop, the precious blood that spills. And the carpet is the best the 1980s have to offer. And so we're really looking forward to pulling that out, putting in a proper platform that's even across the whole front, putting in some dignified flooring that matches the wood, and a new crucifix, and possibly some artwork as well. Father Ed has found a bit of funding for that, as well as it turns out there was a savings account at St. Anne's that was earmarked for a new crucifix. So I won't say that we have all the money we need, but we're starting in good way there. Here, Queen of Angels and St. Joseph, what's going on here? I feel like we're just tootling along pretty well. I can't think of any major news. I installed bells in the churches. If you've been at masses, the bells in the back.
Very nice.
That feels less impactful than a roof in a sanctuary renovation, but I like them, and they do sound nice, and they're pretty cool. We are approaching the Lenten and then Easter season. We have, I want to say, 6 candidates and catechumens who are preparing for reception into the church. Some of them you saw this last weekend, for the rite of sending. and they will be received by the bishop. Our catechumens will go through the rite of election with the bishop. The candidates, those who are baptized in other churches to be received in the Catholic Church, will go through the call of continuing conversion. All that's the same service of the bishop on March 8th. And then we're looking forward to celebrating all sorts of baptisms and confirmations and professions of faith. Some of them on Easter, I think one of them a little earlier. And of course our confirmation kids, pray for them. The confirmation kids and First Communion kids are in the process of doing their first confessions. And of course I can't tell you anything about that except to say there's a lot of nervous kids out there, guys. A lot of nervous kids. But they're doing well. I think I can say that safely. And I'm hopeful that this will not be their last confession, as it ought not be. So I think I've run out of steam on news there, so I will happily pass the baton on to you if you're ready for news about Partners in the Gospel around the
Absolutely.
region.
So thank you, Father Maurer, for having me. And in case any of you have not seen me or heard from me before, I'm Jason Stolberg. I'm the liaison for the Olympic Peninsula, which, you know, even though that's technically my title, I used to say I go as far as Yelm and Olympia and Lacey in part of my family, but now I also have a family actually in Vancouver. So the Olympic Peninsula is just kind of it's a very loose interpretation of that for our geographic region that us liaisons are covering. So one of the things that I do, probably the biggest thing we do as liaisons is we help out all the parish families with Partners in the Gospel, kind of taking this very unwieldy project and all its moving pieces and everything like that, and kind of trying to help it make sense, help guide, help just essentially just walk with these parish families and the pastors, the volunteers, everybody, staff, walk through this process with them, and be able to hear everyone, be able to take that back to the chancery, to the archbishop. I have a monthly meeting with the bishops, just to take kind of the concerns and things like that are happening out here when it comes to Partners in the Gospel. Where kind of some of the other families are at currently. So pretty much, the other family, basically all the families kind of are working now on what's called the One Parish Plan. So the One Parish Plan is basically our roadmap to how we're going to finish this out over the next however long years it's going to take for some of these families to come together. And so this is where the work really begins. And this is where some of these other families are maybe a little bit further ahead. So for instance, some families are forming what's called the Family Advisory Council, Parish Family Advisory Council, which is essentially like a pastoral council, but for the entire family. So some places where you don't have as much geographic distance as a challenge and things like that, some of them already exist. So some parishes have already started to form those. Some places they're doing away essentially with their individual pastoral councils and just having this one mega council essentially. It's kind of taking a place. Other places, because especially places where there's geographic challenges, they still have their individual pastoral councils, and then plus they're forming this larger council as well that slowly over time will start to take the place of all those individual pastoral councils. So in my region, which I happen to have a lot of places with geographic challenges that are, places that are the size of whole states if you lived on the eastern seaboard. But some of those are starting to come together. So while a lot of places in Seattle and Tacoma already have theirs or are very close to having theirs, I think my first one that's going to probably be formed will be, the first one across that finish line in my group is going to be Father Brian Oakes in Lacey. So I think he's going to have his formed by March 15th or so, so middle of March. Everyone else is after that, even even some of your very large parishes that are have a lot of staff to help work on this kind of a thing, like your St. Michael down in Olympia. They're even behind a little bit from Father Brian and Lacey. So there's no rush essentially to forming these family advisory councils and things like that. Father's going to form his. However it makes sense for him and his family, that's the thing. Partners is left up a lot of ways to the pastors to do what makes sense for their particular family. So, pastors have all their leeway in that regard in order to do what makes sense for them. And so that's kind of the big task people are working on right now is working through One Parish Plan. And you all can see those things, actually, one parish plan, all that stuff is actually on the website. So if you go to the archseattle.org website, there's a big Partners in the Gospel link there. I think the part way down, you can click on it and it opens up all the stuff that's happening for partners. Timelines, kind of the basic timelines, letters from the Archbishop, all those kind of things are there for you to explore, as we go through the process. And of course, because I'm here to answer any questions that anybody might have. Any questions that, not necessarily be for me directly, but maybe to take back to the bishops, to, I like to call them the Fathers Gary, so our vicar for clergy and our vicar general. Any of those types of people, or anybody at the chancery, glad to always take those, your feedback, good, bad, or indifferent, back to them.
I'll put a link to, for those of you who look at this online, I'll put a link to that Partners in the Gospel page that has all that information. We put this on YouTube, we put it on my website, we put it on the OP Catholic website, so it might take a couple days for it to go up, so you can always Google it yourself, but we'll put that there as well. Well, this is the point now where you get to ask whatever questions your hearts desire to ask, but maybe we're afraid to ask in other contexts for fear of being excommunicated. So, if you'd like, we can take a couple minutes if you wanted to mull that over, or if you wanted to...
Question for you.
Yeah, please.
Are all the parishes now in families? I mean, is this all the parishes, even the big parishes?
Yes,
They're all connected in some way?
so most of them, yes, there are some standalones, but most of those are like, say, your ethnic parishes. So like Vietnamese martyrs and those kind of places are separate standalone parishes. But all of them, even St. James Cathedral is part of a family. So all of them are, no matter the size. So, St. James, St. Michael, and Olympia, right, is one of our bigger parishes. The Proto-Cathedral in Vancouver, all those very large places are all part of families.
What about the choir?
What about the choirs? What about a choir?
How's it going with that?
I mean, I'm having a real bang up job of choosing hymns before the mass.
We need
Yeah.
music, I think.
Oh no, I would
We're
love
not
to.
singers,
Well, the thing is, you guys are singers. I mean, I'm sorry, but I hate to contradict you, but I'm gonna, darn it. What was it? Two Saturdays ago? Not the last one I was at, but two before. I said I need you guys to sing during communion, and you guys went gangbusters. Like you were going. But you're not. But you don't want to be choir members. That's the kicker.
The thing is that when you're not there, and we have a
guest
priest
priest,
that comes,
yeah.
it's kind of chaotic because it kind of sets the tone, the choir, and so it just feels very unsettled.
I would very much like to have a choir.
And I feel bad for the priest because anyway. Yes.
Well, no, and first of all, thank you for the reminder because I have not been warning my guest priests that there's no choirs. So
Right.
I really do appreciate that because I need to. Poor Father Spicer too, who has been gracious to come out and will be out again, not this Saturday, but the following Saturday. He has a cochlear implant, and so things can be a little more muddled for him,
And
quite
then we
literally.
didn't have and then the speaker didn't work.
Oh yeah, no, I heard the sound system was real exciting.
Yeah. So
Yeah,
anyway.
that wasn't a choir problem.
No,
that was
it
just an us problem.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, the choir for the 5 o'clock mass it's a tough nut to crack because I need someone to lead it, and no one wants. Leading a choir sounds super intimidating, and for any of you to hear, and anyone perhaps who's listening on the recording, a choir really is just a group of people who are willing to take responsibility for picking the hymns according to the readings and leading them. In an ideal world, they would also there would be a cantor who lead the responsorial psalm, but I would 100% settle right now for just people picking the hymns and leading them. We're using the choir loft, and so there's an advantage to not being up in front of everybody. You don't have to worry about people knowing who you are, I suppose, or singing in front of people. We've got the microphone set up there. We obviously can advance things to more complications and more fancy, eloquent, complicated pieces. But really, I would love to have 3 people who are willing to take responsibility for starting a choir. Would be a wonderful thing. And we have guides, if that makes any difference to you or maybe people you know. Our current hymnal in the pews is made by Oregon Catholic Press, OCP, Breaking Bread. And whenever you buy or subscribe to their services, they send a liturgy guide that literally tells you, here are the suggested hymns for this Mass. Now that I said that out loud, you might be wondering why I haven't been looking at that before I pick hymns on Saturday, and I don't know why I haven't, so that might be something I do, but I'd be very glad to have a choir. But have I made any progress on that? No, I have not. I'm very transparent
Well,
on that.
I know you've got lots of things that's down the list.
I could always use
I was
that.
just wondering.
No, I appreciate you, but I appreciate you asking it. And it's always an easy excuse to say I have lots of things to do. That's never going to change. So it need be something. I will say, because I am going on vacation in a weekend, and this weekend nothing's getting accomplished except getting off the edge of the cliff, we're probably at least a couple weeks out from any kind of tangible progress. But yeah.
Father, do we need to stay in the choir loft for the choir, or can we form a choir in the downstairs?
No, I appreciate you asking. No, it needs to be in the choir loft. We want to use that space for a couple of reasons. The primary reason being is that it is the space for it. So we've got the microphones up there, we've got the instruments up there. I recognize that might be an impediment for some who can't take the stairs, and I'm sorry for that. We do have some folks, this applies more to the more developed choirs, but we have some folks, I believe it's St. Joseph's, who can't make the choir loft. One lady who's in a wheelchair, obviously that she's not going up those stairs. I think another one who just has some difficulty, that might be at Port Townsend. And so one of the compromises they made is that they practice with the choirs on the choir night downstairs, and they're kind of the ringer in the congregation, but then they are the cantors who go up and sing the responsorial psalm. So there are always ways that you can participate, but the choirs will be in the choir loft, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, no, thank you, I appreciate that. Yeah.
First of all, this is the first town hall meeting that I've been
Welcome.
able to attend.
I hope you have a good time.
Yeah, so far. So this, maybe a lot of the people here know the answer to this question. And
Sure, there are no stupid questions, sincerely.
So I don't understand why on Friday the kids are not allowed to come up for a blessing
Yeah.
when the rest of us get communion.
Yeah. You know, this question came up at our last town hall here at Queen of Angels, so I'm happy to reiterate it too, because I think it is still a question on people's hearts and minds, like, why is that? The very basic reason is the reasoning of the liturgy itself, which is to say that the liturgy does not allow, and it's written into the documents of Vatican II, as well as I think somewhere else, but Sacrosanctum Concilium, which is the first document of Vatican II, number, I don't know what number it is, says that a priest may never add or subtract anything to the liturgy on his own authority. In fact, not even the bishop can do that, except where it says he's allowed to. Blessings were introduced, I want to say, late 70s, early 80s, into the Mass, and quickly took off, because it does seem like a nice thing to do, to bless people who can't receive communion. But they've never been formally approved by the Church, so while the common is the practice is very common, it's not permitted by the Church. It's actually not allowed by the Church. And if there's one thing you may have noticed about me, I'm a rule follower. I'm very much, the Church says we can or can't do something. You may recall from the day of my installation Mass that I made a promise to follow the laws of the Church in all that I do. And the law is very clear on this, that I may not do that. I know that others do it, and I'm not trying to judge them. I'm not trying to speak for them, but kind of like Joshua, the prophet Joshua, as for me and my house, we will serve the Lord. There's another pastoral reason, and this is a little bit of my extrapolation, not the Church's teaching per se, and it is this. It is good to want something. It is good to see something that you can't yet have, whether it's because of needing confession or because you're not ready for it, and to not replace the thing with something else. And the thing in this case is the Eucharist. It's the body and blood of Christ. It's Jesus himself. And I would propose, or I would assert, that replacing Jesus with anything else when we're not allowed to, and there's no reason to, in the sense of like the Church doesn't call for it. I'm going to use a hard word here, and I'm not directing this at you, okay? It's a form of idolatry. Idolatry being, by relative definition, the replacing of the Lord with something lesser, even if it's a lesser good. And in some cases, this isn't the case for children, but in some cases, there are people who ought to be going to confession or who ought to be converting their lives. But when they realize, I can walk up and get a blessing, they lose the motivation because they feel, this is a worthy substitute. When in fact, we're obliged as Catholics to receive communion at least once a year. And if you're not married in the Church, if you never go to confession, if you're kind of falling away from the faith, but you come, and I'm not saying this about you necessarily, but I come only on certain days of the year or big holidays, the blessing could even be a detriment. And I will tell you as a priest, I have often seen people who come up for blessings over and over again, and even ask, like, hey, what's going on? Oh, I'm not married in the church. Well, we can help with that. Oh, no, Father, I just get a blessing. And so all of that as a piece, both the law of the church but also the pastoral practice, has convicted me to say I won't offer blessings at the time. Now, I do want you to notice, and I want you to pay attention next time you see me at Mass, someone comes up with their arm crossed, because it's not like I tell the kid, get your butt out of here or whatnot. Someone comes up with their arm crossed. What you'll notice I do is I'll bow to them, and you probably see my lips moving, and I'll say something to the effect of, may the Lord be with you, or may the Lord be with you always. I want to acknowledge the person in front of me, especially if they're a visitor and they don't know the custom and maybe they've gone to other churches. I avoid the word blessing, because that's a liturgical act, that's a ritual action, that's an action of the priest. So I don't want to add something, especially formally, to the Mass. But it does seem on a human level there needs to be some sort of acknowledgement, because otherwise you walk up and I just stare at you, that kind of thing. And it's probably worth pointing out as well, there's a blessing at the end of Mass, literally 5 minutes after communion or less, usually longer with our churches, there's a blessing right there. So no one's being denied a blessing. But the point of that part of the Mass really is communion. And the church has not seen fit to change that. I did a write-up on the blog, fathermaurer.com, about this very issue, among other things, and I cited a lot of church documents. So if you desire to read more, and especially if you're like, hey, is this Father Maurer's bugaboo, or is there more to this? I really try to do my homework so that it isn't about me. It's not about my preferences or what I want to do. It's really about what does the church provide for? What does the church direct us for? And this actually went even as far as, then it was called the Congregation for the Doctrine of Worship, which is the governing body for the whole church appointed by the Pope for liturgy in our celebrations. And they basically said, we're still examining the question, but until then, the blessing is properly at the end of Mass. So they didn't say stop doing it, but they also didn't say we could do it. And again, taking that principle from Vatican II, I understand that to mean I'm not allowed to add it in. So other priests may interpret that otherwise, and again, I don't want to impugn them or agree with them clearly, but at the same time, that I hope offers some explanation as to why I do what I do.
Thank you.
Yeah, this one's a hard one too, because I think a lot of parents look at it and go, that's my kid you're not blessing, or that's my friend who came in and not blessing. And the more I can offer why I do and what I do, I think that's really important too. So I don't mind answering that question again, as you can tell from my going on and on.
Two questions. One, what are some of the, when people ask for things to be going on in the different parishes, what are some of the things that other people have been asking for? And then the other one is there anyone wanting to do a book club of some sort that could be a multi-parish combination?
I feel like you have a particular desire there too, and I don't blame you for it if it is. No.
I'm reading St. Augustine right now, the City of God by St. Augustine, which is absolutely
good on you.
I'm loving it. It's so much
well
fun.
done.
I'm laughing at parts of it. My husband's like, "Why are you laughing?"
Augustine's an enjoyable, right? He seems unapproachable.
Enjoyed.
Yeah.
I tried Confessions, and that was hard. But City of God is hysterical. Anyway.
I've never heard it described as such. I may have to revisit it and we can compare notes.
I'm not going deep theology on some of it because he's doing it in Roman history, and I'm not a big Roman historian, so some of the stuff is just funny when he says, and they still worship their gods and they got sacked. Anyways, those are some of the, what are some of the other options people are trying to, curious about or wanting to explore?
No, that's a great question. I haven't, there's a lot I haven't done. I mean, if I'm perfectly frank and honest about my time here so far, I haven't done a comparison or really sat down and thought about what people are requesting across parishes and compare them. But one, as you mentioned it, the thing that immediately comes to mind, and I've heard it at multiple parishes, we wish we had more Bible studies or faith-sharing groups that weren't during working hours. Because a lot of them tend to be, and with no offense to those of you to whom it might apply, a lot of them tend to be really tailored towards retirees who have daytime freedom and perhaps want to avoid nighttime driving. And so folks who might still be obligated to work or might have daytime obligations of any other sort and would like to do evening things, and maybe they can't start it. I mean, again, it's all well and good to talk about starting a group, but not everybody can. Otherwise, we'd have loads of groups. I hear a decent number of people say, gosh, I just wish we had a Bible study or a book study, or even just we want to get together and do something kind of fun, but the fun is really the lubricant for conversation that might get a little deeper. And we've had a little bit of that in some of the parishes. One small group of young adults kind of jumping off of the board game night thing that we did in August when I first got here, continued that, are doing evening prayer and board games on Tuesday nights, I believe, here in this room. But I think, just to answer your question most simply, I think really that would be the biggest thing. And I think there is interest, and again, I don't mean to put it on you like, well, you mentioned it, so you have to do it, but I really would want to emphasize, and I'm not trying to target you, you're just my springboard, how easy it is to start something if you're willing to get a couple of friends and go, hey, let's just try this, you know. I especially something like that. I mean, if you were like, hey, I'm really enjoying this book, I'd be willing to restart it. Maybe you're not, but I'd be willing to restart it if we guys wanted to create a study group. 3 of you get together, say, hey, could we advertise this? Because I would insist that you don't just do you and your 3 friends can go to your house, but if you're willing to do a parish thing, it could be really fun. So anyway, yeah, I'm going to pause there. I hope that gives some...
Oh, no, I was just curious.
Yeah.
That's all, because, I mean, not connecting with a lot of other people in the parish is sometimes difficult.
Yeah.
Because we don't have a lot of, just said it, we don't have a lot of connecting opportunities
Yeah.
necessarily.
I really, one of my focuses for going forward is just those moments of being able to get together outside of the liturgy. Obviously the Mass is the height, the Eucharist is the source and summit of our faith. But the second most important thing, in my opinion, is the social hour after Mass. So there's going to be some emphasis on that going forward as well, and hopefully some restructuring to make it a little easier for folks to volunteer, but also really trying to push people, go sit together and just eat a meal together, or have some snacks together, or at least just stop briefly, because I think that will also kickstart a little bit of the, I don't know how shy or how bold you guys are, so I don't mean to presume on you, but it can be a bit intimidating, to just celebrate the Mass and then turn to someone on the way out and be like, hi, how are you? How'd your day go? Or whatever it might be. It's a little easier when they're wiping off, donut crumbs on their mouth, and suddenly they seem a little more human, or vice versa. So, yeah.
I have a question, Father. Do we have any funds that are available for the youth to go to college? Like if they want to go to Christendom or some kind of college. Are we able to get any grants or anything?
Wait, it's funny you should mention this. My gut is to say no, but I think the answer is yes. Hear me out. Let me think this through. When I got here, I signed a bunch of checks. I sign a bunch of checks all the time, so bear with me. But I don't think they were from the parish. I would swear they were from a group, or maybe it was a fundraising drive. I feel like, and I'm particularly pointing down because I think it's Queen of Angels and St. Joseph particularly, that have some kind of fundraising. It's not a lot. I mean, it's a certain... Does this ring a bell for any of you?
Well, we have a scholarship.
A scholarship.
Trying to put together a scholarship.
A scholarship fund. Thank you. Yeah. So we do have one.
And it covers both us and St. Joe's.
And St. Joe's.
There was one out at
St.
Anne,
Anne's.
but I do not know if it's still there.
Okay. Yeah. So we do have one. I definitely signed some checks for scholarships. It's not huge. It's fairly modest. I want to say it was in the range of $500 to $1,000 a kid. It wasn't many. I think we had 4 to 6 this year for the 2024-2025 year. It wasn't, as I understand it, and again, correct me if I get this wrong, those of you who know about it, I don't think it was particularly requiring that you go to a Catholic school as much as was, we want to help you get higher education.
Right.
So, but yeah, we do.
It was open to any youth from the parishes.
Okay.
They could go to any college, and it was done once they were registered and they had their bill. They submitted it to our bookkeeper, who promptly wrote a check to the college.
Excellent, yes.
And she tracked how much was available throughout each semester as they went through the year.
That's awesome. Yeah.
And some of your different groups always will have
St.
scholarships as
Joseph,
well.
would they go to Zach or would they come here?
They would go to St. Joseph.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
What were you going to say?
Some of your other groups also can might have scholarships as well. Like at least for my Knights of Columbus Council and our assembly, we have a scholarship fund, each budget basically every year that we give to students that go to Holy Trinity, and when they continue on to college. And so our council puts out a certain amount. Like I can't remember what it is per kid. I think $800. We pick 3 kids, $800 each or something like that. And then the assembly matches it. So the assembly then also puts in $800 to those 3 kids. So there's some of the groups may have those kind of scholarships as well. Also, so one point actually I was just thinking about when it came to like the book club or Bible study type of question as well. So, there's no reason why groups can't, like your group leaders can't get together from the different parishes and coordinate things. Now, you're probably not going to go attend something that's out at St. Anne or at St. Mary, with that kind of distance. But there's no reason why you can't necessarily coordinate things like, offering the same program. One example is I co-lead the men's group at my church, Holy Trinity in Bremerton. And we got together, me and the other leader, got together with the leader of the men's group over at Star of the Sea. That's our parish family. So now Star of the Sea is only 5 miles away, so there's that. It's much closer even than St. Joe's and Queen of Angels. But we got together and decided, okay, where kind of can we coordinate a little bit? And so what we did was, for I think about 6 or 8 years, That Man Is You has been, the group has been running That Man Is You over at Star of the Sea. We had never run that program at Holy Trinity for our men's group, so we decided, hey, how about we offer it, and we'll offer it at a more reasonable time. So at Star of the Sea, it's Thursdays at 6 a.m., which is difficult for a lot of people to get to, right? It's mostly targeted at the guys who are about to start their shipyard shift at 7:30. So it's great for them, but pretty much not for anyone else. So we decided we'll make ours at 6 p.m. on Thursday to cover everyone else, basically, who doesn't work at the shipyard. So that's what we did, was let's coordinate that so it's not a time at, like you were mentioning, that only retirees might be able to make it, but maybe at the other location, like so at St. Joseph or whatever, maybe that you do a time that is in the evening for everyone else. So those kind of things can still be can be coordinated together. And those are the kind of things that help this part of the gospel. The part that we're in right now is called getting to know each other, and you're starting to find ways that how can we help each other? How can we coordinate together? How can we come together a little bit closer during this process? And those are definitely ways that you can do that.
Yeah. And it's interesting that you mentioned this, Debbie, because we had a proposal that was submitted, a request that was submitted to our joint pastoral councils. So not all of our councils can meet together, and as we're working towards that larger, I call it a super council in my head, figuring out the logistics of that with 100 miles between the furthest ends is going to be fun. But between Queen of Angels and St. Joseph's, we have been doing both of our finance councils as a joint and then our pastoral council as a joint. So there's still technically 2 councils, but they meet together. And we received a request from a young man who's still in the application process from St. Joseph's, who'd like to join the seminary. And part of the challenge the chancery offers all of our seminarians is, how can you perhaps solicit some help so that you are not completely dependent on the chancery itself, but also perhaps from your local parish. And so this young man submitted a letter to us asking if we might support him on a regular basis. And he had the letter we got was only from one parish, but both councils were like, hey, we'd like to both be part of this and commit even monthly to supporting it. Now, we agreed to do this on your behalf, by the way, so you'll hear more about this in coming days. But yes.
Just a tiny point. We actually both got letters.
I wasn't going to mention that because I wasn't sure if you knew that yet.
I didn't,
yes,
because I have my letter.
I found that out after the fact. So there was a little bit of miscommunication about what exactly he was asking. So we've got some sorting to do. I also talked to the vocation director, and we have some sorting to do. But it's good. And one of the points that came up in that conversation was maybe we ought to create, and this is not a decision as much as future discernment, maybe we ought to create a fund between our parishes for seminarians, because what happens if another young man joins the seminary, God willing, and we don't want to have to, 2 things we want to make sure. We don't want to overcommit ourselves and say, we're going to give $10,000 a year per seminarians, and then we get 10 seminarians, and we're like, well, that was more than we expected. But also, if we should have an influx of guys who want to go to seminary, to have a pool that is already being sort of fed in on a regular basis, that we could say, hey, we are prepared to support you in seminary. But I dare say, if I may speak on your behalf, I dare say, and this is the assertion I made to the councils, I think this is something we can be excited about. Be like, hey, we're ready to support seminarians, and we're doing it already. God willing, this young man is accepted. So I know that isn't quite what the question you asked, but it's a similar kind of idea.
And no, but I was thinking that if we had a envelope,
You want another envelope?
Yeah.
Game on. I've never heard a parishioner ask for that.
No, if we have an envelope.
You're going to be the most popular parishioner in the room.
Just once a year.
I know what you mean, yeah.
Raise money,
Yeah.
for the fund.
No, and I again, these are the kinds of things that I really would love to explore. Again, this only came up, it was a week ago with the pastoral council, so it had never occurred to me, in my vast 15 years of priesthood, so not that long, but it still hasn't occurred to me. It hadn't occurred to me till recently, like, this could be something we could do, and in a modest way. We can't cover the whole costs of college or seminary, but
Right.
to have some sort of contribution and help, and I think in many ways too, it gives us not ownership of the person or the vocation, but skin in the game. To say, hey, we really are part of this. We support you, even though you're, in another state or whatever it might be. Yeah. I'm going to sip my water, but questions?
No. So just to follow up on that, Maurer. So the conversation is generally around seminarians. I always like to add the term to the priesthood and the religious life.
Religious life, yeah.
So if there were a young woman,
Yeah.
to your point, a couple.
No, that's fair.
Would we have provision to, of course, their training is different, but to support them through their novitiate?
I would 100% be open to that. I have to admit to you, I have no idea what that would involve, because religious life doesn't quite have the equivalent of seminary, so it's not like
That's what, yeah,
academic
that's what I just
costs.
said there. But through their novitiate, through their training
Yeah.
period, there would
No,
be.
I would be very open to that. I would like to learn more of what that would entail. I suspect it would be to some degree lesser costs, but I'm sure there are associated costs. So, yeah.
Just little.
No, poke that bear. I appreciate it.
I'm trying to find the appropriate Catholic word that one is supposed to use for this.
No, I appreciate the point, and I know that some folks asked, like the holy hour that came from the vocation office. Folks are asking, well, why isn't this a vocation holy hour for broader vocations? And the only reason I put it out as a vocation hour, or holy hour for priestly vocation, is because that was what I was told it was. So, which is not to preclude vocations to the religious life as well. There's an argument to be made, by the way. None of you have brought it up, but I'm going to preempt you if it's on your hearts. There's an argument to be made that we ought to have some sort of fund to support married couples, but I have no idea what that should look like. If we're talking about vocations, boy, you've got this evil grin on your face. All right, speak, Lord, your servant is listening, if not with a little trembling heart.
The lifelong faith formation at the archdiocese about starting a whisper campaign to get a little tiny pocket fund started up to sponsor couples who want to go to the marriage prep.
Oh, that's a great idea.
They're really limited. We can only do like 20 couples maximum per go, but still it's a great weekend and it's expensive.
It is expensive.
So
what does it
we
cost?
were charging $300 per couple, but it was costing the archdiocese $500 per couple last time I checked, which means we're running at a pretty big deficit.
Yeah.
And if we can sponsor them, we might be able to do them more often, which is awesome.
I feel like you and I have had this conversation, because I would 100% be on board with, like, let's get a pool for married couples.
Let's get a little can going, yeah.
Anything I could get couples to actually, forgive me, I don't mean to judge anyone in the room or anyone you might know, but get married in the church. It's not as hard as it sounds. We can make it work. We can help you. Yeah. I don't want to throw money at you particularly, but I will happily throw money at your costs. Not your dress, not your limo, not your reception, but at the marriage prep, happy to help out
I
with
got a
it.
statistic for you to bounce off of, and Father, if you ever run into anybody in that situation, and say there is a statistical correlation of inverse proportion. The more you spend on the wedding, the less time the marriage usually
Yeah. Yeah, that's a scary thought. I'll just put it that way. It's a scary thought. What else have you got? I hesitate to say this out loud, but I'm gonna. Hit me with your best shot.
What is going on with the family faith group?
Family
What are they doing?
faith formation.
What have they been up to?
I don't know.
They had bowling last month.
Yeah, I can see it from the sign on the wall. Yes,
I haven't heard from Keely.
I haven't heard of this.
I will admit that I don't know. That's the bowling poster, as we can see on the wall. The bowling thing is the last thing I remember. I remember there was something on a Sunday, December, November. There was some.
December was the Advent wreath making.
Thank you.
party.
Okay.
I don't remember. November there wasn't one because it was Thanksgiving weekend. October was the trunk or treat. And
Okay.
I don't remember September.
Ladies and gentlemen, Daniel Burnett, our bulletin editor, repository of much information.
All these months on the website. You can
So
check them.
can I
I
throw
haven't seen one for February. And
can I throw a question at you? I don't know if it's right. So feel free
You
to.
can throw whatever you want at me. I might throw
Don't
something
make
back.
that invitation. Do they typically do something just once a month? Is that sort of,
Yeah.
okay, all right. So I apologize for not knowing,
Well,
but,
no, you've
Oh,
got-
March they're doing the first soup supper.
oh, great, okay, yeah.
By the way, the bowling party was great. I was there.
Oh, yeah? How'd you do?
I came in second.
Really? Look at that.
Goff's daughter beat me.
I have another question based on, marriage prep, but, are we able to get, like any local, or faraway priests, to come in and do like retreats and stuff like that?
We no longer have a retreat committee.
We had a retreat
Okay.
committee?
We
That's
had a retreat committee
amazing.
and they are all
Hey, you guys want to start a retreat committee and a choir for the 5 p.m. Mass? I mean, the answer is technically yes. I mean, we're always certainly welcome to. The hardest part with priests right now is that we don't have enough of them, and we're certainly feeling that pinch this weekend. I will tell you a couple of neat ideas I've had some of my brother priests, my friends, propose, and I'm very much interested in pursuing it someday, TM, which is they will trade parishes. So they'll say, hey, I'll run a retreat and I'll do your weekend masses if you'll go to my parish and cover my weekend masses.
Oh, that's pretty cool.
Yeah, it's a neat idea because then you don't have to worry about coverage. You get all your weekend stuff covered.
Right.
You don't have to worry about stipends because you're basically trading for an equivalent weekend because
Right.
whenever you bring in an extra priest in, you do have to pay for him. And then the only extra burden, obviously, is travel. And if there is a retreat, the work on the retreat. It's something that I'm interested in. We should name the elephant in the room, and that is we're not close to anything. So the closest priests I can get are Father Golly and Father Ed. But I will say that Father Ed's got me beat me on the popularity contest. Like that guy, if you've met his former parishioners, you know that Father Ed is well loved where he's been, and he's certainly well loved here as well. So I dare say that Father Ed has more connections than me. And I've got Father Golly beat, but that's not a fair competition because the man's from India, and he's only been here for a few years. So it feels like an unfair competition. But suffice to say that we do have enough connections that it could be feasible. I think the thing that we'd want to have is a clear what are we inviting them for, And again, I don't mean to put it back on you guys. I don't mean to say if you want it, make it happen. That sounds snotty, and that's not my intention. But what I do need is people to spearhead the effort and to say, hey, our group would like to do this thing. We'd like to run the coordination. Would you help us with limited tasks that won't frankly burden me more than I can handle? But if there were a group, for instance, so say you were the women's study group who is reading Augustine, the Confessions of Augustine, and you heard that Father Fancy McSmarty Pants over in Seattle U or whatnot in that area was really good at this. Maybe he'd written his thesis on this, or he was very charismatic about it. Hey, Father Maurer, we heard that so and so was really good at this. Is there a way that maybe we could invite him? It's not. I won't say I have the cell phone numbers of every priest, but it's not hard for us priests to get in touch with each other, or frankly, put you on to who you might need to contact. So I keep looking at you as if I'm expecting you to form a book study. I apologize.
If you're willing to buy a full set of books, I'm willing if we can find
I'm willing to help you
people.
fundraise to buy a full set of
I'm
books.
willing to lead a discussion group on it. 'Cause I think it's
Well,
going to be a lot of fun.
Sincerely, no pressure intended, though, run with that if you want to. But we could make that happen with the priest trade or whatnot. When we bring in a guest priest, when it's not a swap like that, it does cost us money because at the very least we got to pay them mileage. A lot of priests are willing to do things very, without any stipend, but mileage is a significant factor just coming out here, whether you're taking the ferry and you're driving. So just honor bound, I think we'd want to do that. And then if they offer liturgies, there is a stipend that is mandated by the bishop. Partially it's mandated out as a matter of justice. Partially it's mandated because some of our priests who are retired priests depend on it, and they might have been getting gypped or whatnot or not taking proper care of. So I'm sorry, to answer your question once again in the longest form possible, just call me Pac-Man, just wah, wah, wah. It's absolutely possible. I think the big thing that would be necessary to really make it happen would be a group that has a mission in mind, whether it's a particular mission that day or some long-term plan or whatever, and to have a pretty particular idea of who or what they want and when they want it. And then, of course, I would just encourage you to be flexible because if you want it on Ash Wednesday, for instance, tough, but there might be other conflicts that could come up, so some dickering, some negotiation would happen. Yeah.
And helping actually with running retreats and stuff is something that liaisons can do as well. So So, if you end up having an idea and you want to bounce off me about helping run it, helping the parishioners run it, that kind of thing, being a speaker at it, helping lead it, those kind of things. Those are things that I can do as a liaison. Also, when you're talking about pulpit swap, is actually what you're talking about. I do know my good friend Father Ben Bray loves pulpit swaps. So, I know it's a little far for you guys to swap because he's down in Tukwila, but he is a guy who definitely loves doing those. So yeah, that could be one in your pocket to give a call to.
It was a neat idea when I heard about it. So the guys were like, "Man, we're doing this."
And he ran a pretty good men's retreat too.
Yeah.
So he's a good retreat runner too. So
yeah, thank you. Yes.
I think we all know that you have a bad back, and for that I'm very sorry.
Yeah.
But would it help you at all if you came down off the step and, we're at the floor level?
People have asked that question. The fact of the matter is I'm on the step for most part because in most churches, when I'm down, I'm not a small man, as you may have noticed, and both in girth and just wingspan. Very often, if people are coming up with walkers or canes or wheelchairs, which isn't all the time, I mean, most parishioners are ambulatory without assistance. In some of our parishes, not all, there isn't enough room for them to get around, or someone, they get up and then they start moving and there's this weird shuffle. So the step has just become a habit for me, just so I'm out of the way. I'm the most out of the way. But the real problem is, it doesn't matter where I stand, people will always stand an extra foot away. It just happens every single time. I shower every day, whether I need it or not. I buy quality deodorant, but I think there's this kind of just piety, and so the step is a physical obviousness because I kid you not, when I've been in parishes that didn't have a step, for instance, I end up slowly moving forward down towards the pew. So the key isn't so much the bending; it's the bending and reaching. That's what gets me because. Different heights and whatnot. I mean, some of you, God love you, you're short, and then I'm tall, and that's the way it is. But it's the bending and having to reach out that'll do me in pretty quickly. I mean, do that 5 times, and suddenly it's a real pain, and it doesn't matter what height it is. So people have proposed that, and thank you. That's a kind consideration. But yeah, my advice always is, and the step is nice too because I can tell them. In our church, for instance, we have those beautiful marble tiles. Stand on the tile closest to the step because I can always inch a little back. But if you make me inch forward, it's really obvious I'm going to have to come down off the step. And it isn't obvious for one person, but when there's no step, you'll see me inch forward and forward and forward and forward if I allow that. So, yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, Sarah, I could get a back brace, but I'm not ready to admit my age quite that much yet, so.
So your standard for creating a group is when 3 or more are gathered.
I feel like you're setting me up for a fall here. I feel like you're.
Say what?
I feel like you're about to tell me that Jesus had lower standards than I do.
No, that was where 2 or more.
Yeah, that was, yeah.
It's where 3 or more are gathered together, we raise money.
Is that a group you're interested in creating?
No, I'm thinking of a social group.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, but yeah, 3 or more, basically. The logic behind it's not meant to be some sort of hard and fast thing. Well, mostly hard and fast, but it's not like church teaching. In my experience, when you have just 2, if one goes down or goes on vacation, the burden gets too much. But if you have 3 and one goes down, you've at least got some sharing going on. So that's the logic.
One of the observations, one of the least underserved groups in our parish are those of us of a more mature perspective. Now, you make fun of the fact that we do not like to drive at night, and that
I don't
we
make fun of
go
that.
out
I don't make fun of that
5:30.
fact. I want to be clear. No, because I don't like driving at night.
But we do have our quirks.
Do you?
But there is no. We used to have in a time. We used to have some social activities that lent itself to the mature in the parish, over 50s.
Yeah.
I'd like to see that again. An opportunity. I'm not talking about something regular, but the occasional social event that would be.
Yeah.
More for folks whose children have left home.
Yeah, I mean, I'm certainly
And we
game.
are celebrating the fact that they have left home.
Empty nest goes through its own stages. It starts with grief, but ends with
Empty
celebration.
nest is a myth.
Yeah, no, I mean, I'd be very happy to support that. I think I might challenge your assertion that you're that group is the most underserved group. I don't know that that's
Funerals don't count, Father.
Why thinking not? Do you know how much work a funeral is? You don't have to do any work. You just lie there. But that wasn't what I was.
I am not even going to Courtney's
You started that. I'm sorry. I'm only taking 50% of the blame for that direction, I'm afraid.
We won't say it was tacky, but it got close.
Yeah, well, you know.
No, but there were, for those of us who've been around a few years, there were, mix-ups, there were other activities, munch, things that people who don't go out after dark enjoy doing, and those have kind of fallen by the wayside.
I'm not trying to make an excuse, but it has been my observation as a Catholic. I mean, this isn't even as a priest, but it's more acute as a priest now. It seems to me, and this is sort of my general theory of the dip and the rise, or the rise and the dip, really, in parish activities, that we had a generation that was super active, and if I may say so, you're one of those who's super active in the parish and leading different things. And the younger generation below that, and looking around this room, I dare say that the gap is evident here. Your current 70-year-olds and your current 60-year-olds, and I mean mid-60 at this point, and I don't know what birth year that would be, but your 70s and your late 60s, and then people who are currently in their late 40s to their late 50s, they disappeared. They stopped coming to church. And I'm sure it correlates with a certain generation, with the sexual revolution and whatnot. And that's kind of the prime volunteer age, because like you say, your kids have started moving out. You're maybe coming towards a peak in your career where you can start, either you have more freedom because you're a senior level and you have more freedom, or you might be heading towards retirement and you're on your way out of that. And those are people who are the movers and shakers in the parish. And I would maybe ask you to consider, when you were that age too, of perhaps maybe that was when you really started getting involved and have continued getting involved. And without that generation, we're relying on folks who have continued to serve very generously, but perhaps are easily knocked out by quite literally a fall or an illness or whatever it might be, or folks who are in their mid to low 40s or younger who don't yet have that freedom, or perhaps don't have that experience, and plus they don't have any mentors of that slightly older age. I don't mean to make that as an excuse, but I think we're feeling the pinch of that pretty keenly in our parishes. And I've been grateful for some of our more middle-aged folks, and I'll use that language generously, but in their 40s or so, who are starting to get involved. But I feel like we're still some years away from them hitting the point where they're involved more. Again, I don't mean to say we'll make it happen, but I don't really put it on you. But I would absolutely be, hey, let's do the thing, whatever it might be.
Some of the things re-energized.
Yeah. As always, the hard part is who will do it. And I mean,
Always the issue.
And everybody has lots of things to do, but I would dare say that one of the hard parts is that there's many really good ideas, and not as many folks willing to grab onto it. And I'm not pointing at you. I know how involved you are, so I don't mean to make that be a statement on you.
Well, I mean, I'm just sitting here thinking, we've talked about youth, we've talked about school families, which I think that's a wonderful program. I'm delighted that they're doing things. But the energy, you're right, the energy that was there for 2 or 3 programs, we used COVID as kind of the excuse.
Well, yeah. No, and it's a fair thing. I mean, I have a lot of sympathy for those who during COVID said, okay, I'm ready to, because it was an easy way to exit out without anybody really questioning it. But I also, in my last parish, I remember, there was a guy who was 80 years old, and he'd been running the ushers for probably a decade, and he came to me, and he had heart surgery during COVID. Like, he knew he was going to have heart surgery. He's like, I'm piecing out now. Like, I'm just quietly going to fade out. And it wasn't because he didn't want to do it. He was like, I'm kind of tired. I've just been doing this for a while. And I definitely, I mean, we joke, I think, a lot of times in the Catholic Church about how you volunteer once and you're never stopping until the day of your funeral. There's definitely truth to that. But, I also can respect that some folks might be like, all right, I see an exit, I'm going to go ahead and take it from volunteering, or at least volunteering as much.
3 or more.
3 or more. Yeah. I'm willing to entertain less, never one. I'm never going to let just one person lead something because it's too unstable. But you have to present a pretty convincing argument and plan to get away with only two. It's possible, but 3 or more is, I won't say it's a slam dunk, but it's much more assured.
I heard a rumor that you were going to change the way that we do coffee hours and stuff like that. And I was just wondering if you could mention what your plan is.
I want to know who your source is. It's not a secret. It's not a secret. So, a little bit of context, because I do want to explain myself, and I have already made a change, although it's not so much promulgated as much as just internally. So we needed to standardize the name, first of all. So some parishes call it coffee hour, some call it fellowship hour, some call it social hour. We settled on social hour. That'll be the name officially as we move forward. The biggest problem that I've encountered with regards to the social hour has been that some parishes do it, some parishes don't. And when I first got here, I think every single town hall, almost every single town hall, I've mentioned how important it is to have the social hour after Mass. The little shtick I have about the Eucharist being the most important, social hour being the second most important, that is a theme of my priesthood because it's been my observation. And I talked about this, I remember particularly at St. Anne's in Forks, I was talking about this, and I watched the little old ladies who are stalwarts of the parish, who I'm certain could face down a dragon, and the dragon would be cowed. But at the mention of a social hour every single Sunday, I watched them get more and more tense. As I mentioned, finally I'm like, what is going on? Because I don't know what's happening here. And I said, Father, we can't possibly do it. It's too much work. And I said, what do you do at your social hours that's so intentional? Well, it's a full meal. We have a breakfast. We have these different things. We have potluck. We can't possibly do that every Sunday. And I said, well, no wonder you're getting scared. What I really want, the bare minimum for social hour that I want now, I want to be very clear. I want real coffee. I don't want any of this instant garbage. So that's my one thing. And I want real cream. We can buy that at the store. You don't have to make it yourself. So powdered cream, if I see it in the parish, I'm throwing it away. It's not an empty threat. I will do it. All right? Liquid creamer only. Tread carefully. I'm not sure I'm ready to face the dragons who own that cabinet is the thing. But my bare minimum for social hour is this. Give me coffee with cream. Give me Oreo cookies. We can do a social hour every single Sunday if we start there and build up. And what I've come to discover, and I think that this has been our experience in most of the parishes, we do social hour here fairly frequently. We do social hour at St. Joseph's with a little less, but still fairly frequently. St. Mary's and St. Anne's in Forks, in Port Townsend and Forks respectively, have been doing it, but they're the ones who are most nervous. But what everyone has been telling me is the social hour is particularly burdensome for a number of reasons because it's been so elevated to practically a buffet. And people are either responsible for cooking meals or bringing in dishes. In some of our parishes, they're paying for it themselves. The parish has no buy-in whatsoever. So if you're hosting it, you're in charge of paying for it. And so I sat down with some of the leadership, not all of the leadership. I haven't completed it yet. So the changes aren't coming yet, but my plan is to reduce the overall spread on a regular Sunday to basically some form of pastries, coffee, and maybe some other alternate drink. So a basic set there that the parish pays for. I have not discussed this with our Pastoral Finance Council, members of which are sitting in this room right now, so we're going to have to worry about funding that as well. Obviously, we'd have donations and whatnot out for it. And then somehow, for folks who want to provide more things, allow for it. So if you want to bring your potluck goulash or your quiche, I'm all about the quiche, whatever it might be, you can bring it, but it's not an expectation. Because I dare say, and people have voiced this to me, they don't want to volunteer for social hour because of the expectation that it's this really highfalutin meal or that I'm paying for it myself. And so we don't have the volunteers in a lot of parishes. And again, I had real meltdowns in the far extremes of our places because they when they heard social hour or coffee hour, they heard this really high standard of production. And it's not that I want to lower our standards if people want to bring those things, but I don't want our standards to be so high that no one wants to volunteer, and I certainly don't want the financial burden to be on those who are volunteering. Right. So this isn't going to happen right away because, to be perfectly honest, the person that I talked to most recently was only at one parish. I've talked to someone here, and I'm going to keep those names, The innocent or guilty, depending on who you talk to. But I actually gave him permission to speak freely, so there's no sin there. But I haven't really. This is something that I want to implement across the parishes. I think the only exception that we'll probably have is St. Thomas the Apostle, because they actually do a potluck after every single Mass. There's about 20 to 25 of them that show up for Mass, and it's literally their luncheon every single time. I love going to St. Thomas. It's so much fun. I love every parish. I love every church, I want to be clear. So am I planning on doing that? Absolutely. And that's the rationale. I hope it makes some sense. I've seen some of you nodding, but the goal is not to tear it.
Very simple. It's coffee and donuts, but donuts are a lot cheaper in those days.
Yeah.
And then the Gills sort of got in it, and they baked.
Yeah.
The women have quit baking.
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, it's very hard.
No,
it's way out of line.
No, it's really expansive at this point, and it's really expensive, and it's really intimidating. If you're a parishioner who wants to join in and you heard about coffee hour, and then you go to coffee, and don't get me wrong, when I'm rushing between here and St. Joseph, I love the spread. I love it so much. But I do look at it and go, this probably took an hour, this one dish to cook. Like this was a real recipe, this was a real work, and it's one of probably 10 or 15 dishes. I have had parishioners who have told me, Father, I wouldn't go to coffee hour if it weren't for these dishes. And I think there's a hurdle we're also going to have to work on, because I don't want to chase people away, and I don't want to disappoint people, so we've also got to find...
I worked a coffee hour where the guy demanded bacon.
I want to be very clear, we're recording, so I won't tell you what my response would be, but you can imagine it, and it would involve some fierceness to that person, because you want to make your order, Jack in the Box is just down the road, open 24 hours. Yeah. But I do want to offer breakfast, and the idea of having a breakfast every month, I know the Knights of Columbus here do that every month. When I was growing up, I was a military brat, but when I was at St. Olaf's and Polsbo during their heyday, they used to have a pancake breakfast every single month, and it was the Knights usually, but I really looked forward to that. And part of lowering the expectations is kind of like that longing thing about communion. You're raising the hope for the really big thing, you're making it special. And nobody means to make anything less special, but by allowing a proportionate sort of effort at different times, we're going to appreciate it.
Are you in favor of breakfast monthly or every week?
Monthly.
Okay.
Monthly.
I would also suggest if you want to do pastries, also have something that's diabetic.
Yes.
Diabetic.
Yeah, we got to work on some dietary options, 100%.
It doesn't have to be huge, but I mean, just something where they can.
No.
And we also have people that are gluten-free.
Yeah, gluten-free, allergy-wise. At my last parish, I had a couple of folks, and the key thing is just to go to them and say, hey, what do you buy, for instance, at Costco or what? I had somebody, he had a set of daughters who had a plethora of issues. God love him and God love them. And so, he said, what kind of snacks, maybe that are a little treat-wise? And we'd go, we're blessed, we have Costco nearby. That, by the way, was one of the first things I looked up when I got this assignment. Is there a Walmart? Is there a Costco nearby? We're good. You even have a movie theater. I'm so excited. We go to Costco and have a box of a certain kind of chips that were, non-allergenic for them and something gluten-free. Yeah.
I don't know. Sometimes if somebody from your hospitality group or something goes and talks to any of the bakeries or anything like that, sometimes you can get a deal on things. So Holy Trinity gets a pretty good deal, I heard, from the local Safeway on their donuts, because they buy several dozen at once. So they give them a pretty good deal on that. And then also Holy Trinity does a parish breakfast once a month. So it doesn't seem to be too heavy a lift for the groups.
Yeah. No, people. I've been pleasantly surprised. When I think we rightly sometimes discern that a lot of people are against the faith and against churches and against the Catholic Church in particular. But I've been pleasantly surprised to discover how many groups or even businesses are like, we want to help you out. Like, we actually are quite friendly. So.
Oh, and also, it's not just in the heyday of St. Olaf. They're doing a monthly pancake breakfast now again. So.
So I still have my membership. You didn't ask this. I'm going to tell you. I still have my membership with the Knights of Columbus there. That was the Knights of Columbus group that I started with when I went to seminary. And I get a little membership card every year. So St. Olaf's has a place. I love you all. Don't get me wrong. You're my parish. But St. Olaf's has a place in my heart, because that was the first parish I was at long term as a military brat. So, yeah, I'm glad to hear they're doing that. We have about 20 minutes left before our time runs out, but if you have a burning question. I'm going to have dead space to clear out of my recording. I can see it already. That's fine. I have software to do all that. Yeah.
I've been in this parish since 1962, and at that time, because of my church and school involvement, I felt I knew most of the parish.
Yeah.
This leads up to, is there a pictorial directory in our future?
I would love to have a pictorial directory. I will tell you, I have a real beef with one of the companies that tries to sell it to different parishes, and I will never do business with them again. I won't name who they are because we're being recorded, but I know their name and they know my name. and I'll tell you the story so you can understand kind of the fervor with which I speak. I was at a parish where they come in and they take photos, and their business is to sell photos. So like they want you to buy their photos. Happy to support that. Frankly, I'll buy a photo for myself or my mother who says, "You got another photo? Send it to me." That kind of thing. But they also promise that they will help you put together the thing. Like, we'll give you the software, we'll walk you through it, we'll help you arrange everything. And this particular company, and they're very prolific across parishes, what they do is they send you software from the 1990s, which incidentally, 30 years old now, remember that. It was new some time ago, but hasn't been for a while. And then they don't respond to your phone calls or your emails or help you out. And at one of the parishes I was at, we started with them, and we couldn't finish the directory. We couldn't put it together because we couldn't figure out the software or get it done. And I moved parishes, and they kept calling and saying, you haven't submitted your final directory for us to print. And I'm like, yeah, because you guys haven't responded to any of our calls for help. So we didn't finish it, and I moved to another parish where they were in the same process. And I got there, and my PA said, yeah, we really don't like this company. And I thought, I remember them. And I kid you not, within a week, the same representative who had called me at my former parish called me and said, and they got my voicemail, and they said, Father Maurer, we remember you from somewhere, and you're the new pastor. We'd like to talk to you about your pictorial directory. And I called them back and gave them a piece of my mind about how that went. Which is to say, if we do it, I would want 3 or more people to help coordinate the thing and do the directory. Now, I happen to know that we have some folks who are particularly talented at design and putting things together, but I will say that those folks tend to always get leaned on. But I love a pictorial directory. I love it partially because, especially as one who has multiple parishes, I will admit to you, you don't have to tell me, especially since we're on recording, I don't know your name. I don't know most of your names, unfortunately. And I love to cheat and look you up in a book and be able to do that. And it's quite lovely to be able to do that and to know who's connected to who and who's married to such and such or kids or parents of such and such. Is it in our future? I don't have plans particularly. I would be very much open to it. But yeah, nothing in the works. I will say that our PAAs at both parishes have remarked that it's been a moment since our last one. So
2019.
Okay, yeah, that's a
6
little.
years.
Yeah, it's a bit of time. Yeah, am I open to it? Yes. We'll have to make sure we pick the right company, and there's more than one, so we're not out of options. But there's one in particular that is not an option. So. I do like directories. I really do. So please take that not as a rejection, just a qualified affirmation. You guys are easy. You've given me a quiet night of questions. I appreciate that. All right, last call then. I won't leave you sitting here staring at me. I don't want to make that awkward. But
I gotta ask.
Yes.
So, is the long-term goal,
Yes.
whether that's 2 or 5 or 10 or 20 years,
Sure.
is the long-term goal for the archdiocese to have one Catholic church on the peninsula?
It's not even possible. No way.
No, I agree.
No.
100%, but
No,
you talk about a parish family,
Yeah.
and we're doing this together, but
Yeah.
for support tenants and
Yeah. No, there's please pardon a little bit of crassness. I hope it's not too much. There's not a snowball's chance in hell that's going to happen. There's just not. Yeah.
Good, that's good. Thank you.
The fact of the matter is, it would take a major crisis, and by which I mean we don't have enough priests to staff anything, for us to have one church, because you'd all have to drive to whatever that one church is. And keep in mind, a single priest can only say so many masses per day. There's very strict, no exceptions allowed rules about that. Like, even the bishop himself, even the pope, well, the pope can change the law. The pope can always change it, but it would take the pope to add it. And there's good reasons for those limits, because at some point, I'm just saying the words and doing the motions. I'm not praying anymore. And so we need a certain number of priests to offer a certain number of masses, and it needs to be within reasonable driving distances. And we're perhaps, I won't say we're the most, but it's possible that we are the most separated geographically. I'll just be very open and honest, and those of you who are on councils could read between the lines in my correspondence before I got here. I was eyeballing closing parishes before I got here. I was looking at it and going, what can I close? Because I have too many churches. And it wasn't until I visited St. Thomas Mission in Clallam Bay. It was my second visit out here. We went out to St. Thomas Mission, and it was in my sights. I was looking at it and going, why do we need this church? This is 30 minutes away from St. Anne's. Surely you could just drive out here. And then I got out there and I thought, this is a long ways away. Because 30 minutes doesn't count the winding and the road and the conditions and whatnot. And as I was talking to John Nolan, our PAA, and he's talking about folks coming out from Nia Bay, which is already 45 minutes to an hour, depending on conditions as well. And then, of course, conditions from Forks here. Yes, there's a couple of routes you can take, both around the lake. And recently we had the lake flood, and one side flooded and one side froze, and suddenly neither way was passable. And even our two churches between Sequim and Port Angeles, which in theory, why do you need two churches that are half an hour apart? Except neither one of them can fit all the people that need to come to masses there. And of course, Port Townsend is a similar thing to Forks in the distances. So you could argue that, okay, maybe the diocese is trying to consolidate or whatnot, but the real purpose of Partners in the Gospel is not so much the consolidation. We're doing this because of the priest crisis. There's no doubt about that. We would not be doing this if we had enough priests at every parish. But the priest crisis is driving it. That's the engine, or that's the motivating part of this. But the purpose of this is so that we can find sustainability with both our priests and the facilities if a facility needed to close. And I would dare say none of our facilities need to close. If we go down a priest, if we don't have 3 priests, that does change. And then we have to look at hard decisions. But that will only happen if there aren't enough priests to send out here. And believe me, I've had that conversation with the bishop, with the chancery. A change that I'd love to do, and I've floated this to our councils, happy to float it to you. I floated it in Sequim at one of the town halls, the last town hall there. I would love, bear with me, gasp if you want, but let me finish talking before you respond. I would love to tear down your church, and I would love to tear down the church in Sequim. And I'd love to use the stained glass windows and the altars and the fab things to build a mega church in between Sequim and Port Angeles. I want $30 million, you guys. I want 100 acres. I'm watching our finance council member bury her head in her hands. I want a church that can fit 1,000 people. I want a new school with the possibility of building a high school. Don't shake your head at me. I'm allowed to dream. I want a cemetery. I want a new rectory. And I want a big field for us to have picnics.
And when you put the speaker up, you don't put it right in the middle of the...
No, we're going to have discreet speakers,
yes,
good sound system, with no feedback.
Right
it's going to be amazing. Yeah, and with beautiful art and all the things. I think that I half tease. I'm actually half serious about that. I think that, God willing, if I can stay here long enough, we could actually look towards that long term. I think we have the people and the funds for a major capital campaign down the road. And the reason I mention that, though, the reason I mention it at such an early stage is the only place that makes sense where you could close and consolidate and build a bigger one single church would be Sequim and Port Angeles. We're landlocked in our spaces as we are. We can't grow here at all, not without buying out houses. And even then, we'd have to do so much work that it would cost just about as much to tear down as it would be to build up. Sequim is even more landlocked, although in theory, you could bulldoze the property we have and extend the church sideways. But where are you going to park? What are you going to do? But we've got, there's lots of land in between. I have no idea how biddable it is. I have no idea how available it is. It would make sense to build one big church between Sequim and Port Angeles. You'd have to drive a bit more, but you're talking, if you put it dead center, you're talking, 8 miles extra between, wherever you're driving from? What's that?
Agnew.
I don't know what Agnew is, I'm sorry.
So out by Drager Kitchen down out that area.
It's about
Halfway between.
Oh, that's the location. Thank you, sorry. I didn't know what that word meant. Agnew. Is that a verb? Is it a noun? Thank you. Yeah. So the point being, the goal is not to close anything. There will be closures elsewhere in the diocese. You can look in some of our metropolitan areas, and you can look at attendance, and you can look at, frankly, building condition and places around it. There was a place, I won't name names because they have discernment to do, but there's 2 churches close to each other within minutes. One church is big, one church is small. One church is physically huge and fiscally and physically viable. One has had major repairs. It's the work of a moment's review of things to go, we're probably going to have to close this smaller church that's falling apart. But we don't want to do it right away because there's a community there. There are people there. We got to walk them through looking at the reality and doing that. And that's part of what Partners in the Gospel is what is the reality? Not every reality is closure. I don't think the reality of closure applies to us unless we get reduction in priests. And I will tell you, again, I was anticipating that we were going to go down to 2 priests when I first got here. And so that was why I was targeting, what am I going to have to close? And within 2 weeks of me arriving, I called up the chancellor and I'm like, this is not feasible with just 2 priests. Like if we go down to 2 priests, not only will we have to close something, but you'll probably kill the remaining 2 priests. And they agreed. Now, they didn't make me any promises. Notably, there was no signing on any dotted line. But I've had some real support in saying, this is a priority. And in the conversations just recently, especially in light of Father Ed's sort of health awareness, one of the things that someone at the Chancery volunteered to me is the real thing on the heart of many people, and I dare say even on the heart of clergy with pointy hats, is that we not fall into the trap we have fallen into so many times, which is, you're not close to Seattle, so we're just going to do whatever we want to you or neglect you, and we're going to focus on the parishes that are close to us or bigger or wealthier. There's no promise in that, but there is, I think, at least an awareness of perhaps bad decisions or less discerned decisions in the past, and really trying to make viable what is viable. And I think we are viable. So I'm sorry, that was a bit of a...
And that's what this why us liaisons exist. I mean, not as people, I mean that, but as a God job, created you for as this. A job position, right? Is for that exact reason, which you said, was that to make sure that these community, all of our communities, at the far reaches of the archdiocese are being represented properly, back to the chancery, back to the archbishop, back to the bishops, and also, when it comes to closures and things like that, the archdiocese is not going to. One thing they are making sure to say to everyone, they're not closing anything, right? The archdiocese isn't going to close anything at all. It's actually going to be up to these parish families for them to discern and figure out what's viable for us as a family. What do we need to do to essentially circle our wagons, build a good foundation, springboard out, so we end up not having to consolidate again in 10 or 20 years, right? So that's what the whole crux of all the work that's going to happen in one parish plan is for these different parish families to figure out what's going to be viable for us. You're right. If you have 3 churches on the same block or something like that, right, and all of them are only 50% full or less, then it's going to make sense for them, right, that, we probably need to close a site, we need to circle up and that kind of thing. For places with geographic challenges, like here, where you got so much distance, it'd be really hard to see a way that would be a viable decision by your, pastor and the advisory council and things like that come to that conclusion. Oh yeah, we should just close something, right? That's not probably something that's going to happen. But again, it's going to be up to your individual parish family to figure out how to make your, not just, where you're surviving and you're barely viable, but how can we long-term, become a more vibrant church again? And that's the goal of one parish plan.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I think it's a reasonable fear, honestly, to go, are we closing or whatnot? And I think that there are places where that really does apply. I don't think we have as much to worry about on that front, even though we are in one of the far-flung areas of the diocese. So, no, I appreciate putting a voice to it. Thank you.
When you build that mega church.
Yeah, it's going to be great. I'm so excited about it.
Don't forget a columbarium with the...
Yeah, no, 100%. No, in fact, it's funny you should mention this. So we have a Catholic cemetery on the peninsula, out at Port Townsend. It's the only Catholic cemetery north of the Hood Canal, north of the Canal Bridge, as far as I'm aware, at least. And we don't have a columbarium there. And we have some land, but land eventually runs out. You can only bury so many people in a plot. And we have been talking about it. It costs a bit of money to erect, and we have a roof to pay for. But we're talking about putting a columbarium there. There are beautiful ways you can do it that are dignified, that are permissible by the church and whatnot. But yeah, I want my cemetery. You know, I have to give credit where it's due. I hadn't thought of the cemetery till our PAA, John Nolan, was like, Father Maurer, we need to put a cemetery on some of that acreage. The problem with cemeteries is once you designate a place a cemetery, but by state law, you have to pay for it, like maintain it in perpetuity. So thankfully, as much as sadly our society doesn't respect the living as much as it ought to, we nonetheless do respect the dead and those places of burial. At least we're learning to respect the dead and places of burial more and more. And so state and maybe even federal law, once you designate a place a cemetery, you must have a fund in place for its care in perpetuity, even if the institution that started it fades away. So, yeah. So it's a pretty big responsibility to do it. But darn it, we're the Catholic Church. We've done this well, I think, for many, many years, and I think we could do it too. So, yeah. All right. Well, you guys look like you're winding down, and that's okay. Shall we pray before we go? All right. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. Amen. And of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Thank you all very much. I love doing this, and I'm really glad you came, so thank you.